Hi everyone, it's Connor again. So if you watched the previous video about being able to do a scale outline over the 12-bar blues form, that whole thing and so on and so forth, let's say you've mastered that. And then it's like, okay, great, I can play a scale outline, but that's not really improvising. What now? So let's talk a little bit about what the true meaning of improvisation really is. Okay? The reason why improvisation seems to be shrouded in mystery to a lot of people that try to do it or even try to teach it is because there's this general assumption that I think is going around that only certain people can do it, that only certain people are gifted enough to be able to hear what they want to play and to make it work over the chord changes. And based on my experience, that's just not true, because this whole notion of improvisation can really be broken down to a science. And I want to tell you historically why that's possible, okay? If we think about great classical masters and Baroque masters of music, such as Bach or Mozart or Beethoven, and even Liszt and Chopin and a bunch of other people, they were improvisers too, historically. Because if you think about it, let's say Mozart is performing a piano concerto that he wrote, and he gets to the end of the third movement, and on his music it says cadenza, which musicians know that means, kind of going off on this grand, it's kind of like the finale of the piece that you're trying to perform. And it's commonplace now for cadenzas, for musicians in recent years, to already be written out. So all the musician has to do is just to read that cadenza. Well, back in those times, cadenzas weren't necessarily written out all the time. So if I'm Mozart and I'm sitting at my piano and my music says cadenza, but I have nothing written there, I have no other choice but to improvise. So what I'm saying here is that even, 200, 300 years ago, the great musicians had to be improvisers in order to successfully play. We also know historically that someone such as Bach improvised fugues for royalty on command. So why, aside from the fact that, Bach and Mozart were musical geniuses, and you could argue they were savants in some way, but other than that, why were they able to improvise like that? And what it really comes down to is because they knew basic things. They knew about scales and they knew about harmony. So that's what I'd like to get into today, specifically with the dominant seventh scale. In the previous video, I showed you the scale outline for the 12-bar blues, and because we're primarily dealing with dominant seventh chords as the primary quality of chord that we're trying to improvise over in that form, that's what I'd like to talk about today. It's just simple ideas on the dominant seventh scale. So by now you should be able to just run, for instance, a B-flat dominant seventh scale by itself. Just like that. But today I'd like to take some time to explore what I would consider the basics of, playing small things based upon a scale. Because when we practice small things that come from scales, what we can do is we can take the small things and we can put them together in an infinite number of different ways. It's almost like speech, You don't learn full sentences at once, especially when you're learning how to speak. You learn about the small words, the small phrases first, and then you put them together. It's like me talking to you right now, I'm improvising in a sense because I have an idea of what I'm going to say, but I don't know exactly what I'm going to say. But it's because I've spent, 23, 24 years of my life speaking that it comes naturally to me. And with improvisation, it's the same kind of deal. If you take the time to practice the small things and then practice putting them together in different ways, then that's the ticket. That's what's really going to accelerate your growth in playing this music. So let's talk about a B-flat dominant seventh scale. We can play it, just up and down like that. But what about playing it in thirds? playing it in triads. And so on and so forth. Okay, there's another way. What about the full seventh chords? So these are the 4-note chords built upon that scale. That's another tool to utilize. What about if we did those previous 3 examples, but we added a half step below the first note? So if I go back to playing thirds for a second, instead of just playing a third like that, I'll approach the first note of the third a half step below. So instead of like that, I'll do it like this. And I can do that for every single scale degree on the B flat dominant 7 scale, and that looks and sounds like this. And when you play that at a faster tempo, it sounds pretty impressive. Right? What if I did the same thing, but I did triads, approaching with the note a half step below? What about doing the same thing, but with the full 7th chords? Right? So those are some ideas that can intuitively be figured out over any scale, in any key really. If it works in B flat, on B flat 7, you can bet it's going to work on F sharp 7. You know, if it works on any key, it obviously works in all the other 12 keys. Let's keep going. What about major arpeggios and inversions of major arpeggios? So for B flat dominant 7, the important arpeggios are the arpeggios built on scale degree 1, scale degree 5, and scale degree flat 7. So in other words, that would be the B flat major arpeggio, the F minor arpeggio, and the A flat major arpeggio. Why practice that? Well, to put it into context, there's a Charlie Parker blues head called Chi Chi that uses an inversion of a major triad, and it starts like this. You know, an A flat major, that's an A flat major triad, but inversion. So if Bird knew that, then we have to practice that too. There's another really pretty arpeggio that comes in too, and it's the augmented arpeggio. So the difference between a major arpeggio and an augmented arpeggio is you just sharp the 5th. So an augmented arpeggio looks like this. And you can play the different inversions of that too. Simple. So basically what I'm showing you, these aren't the only things that you need to practice. You know, there are an infinite number of things that you can do on any given scale, whether it's a dominant 7th scale, major scale, whatever. It's just up to you to explore those different options so that you have more puzzle pieces to work with in order to put them together to make phrases, right? Let's see what else I can think of. There's also, and anything that you can do ascending, you can also do descending. So at the beginning when I did thirds going up, why not going down? Or what about triads going down? Or the full 7th chord? Right? So there's so much that you can explore with this. Now, let's talk about let's go back to the fully diminished 7th chord for a second. You know, after watching previous videos, that a dominant 7 comes from a fully diminished 7th chord, right? So that automatically means if I'm soloing over a chord that has that's dominant in quality, I can use a fully diminished 7th chord. It's perfectly valid because that's where a dominant 7 comes from. So I just want to give you a few ideas of things to practice over a dominant 7 scale, and in the next video I'm going to talk about something that'll really help your agility and ability to move quickly between different ideas in an effective way that makes strong resolutions and will ultimately make your improvisation sound more intelligent. So stay tuned for the next video. I got a good one coming for you.